Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. I'm really happy that you're here with me today. Look at this day. Isn't it just spectacular? So the nice thing about the weather right now is that it's sunny, but it's not nearly as hot as it was a couple of days ago when I canned my peaches. It was insanely hot, so hot. But now it's just beautiful and we have a really nice cool breeze that's blowing through. The perfect day for getting some work done out in the garden. I have to show you the peas every time we come past because they're so beautiful. Look at these dainty little flowers. They look like sweet pea flowers, but these are dwarf purple, what are they? Sugar snap peas. So pretty. I had the sprinklers going last night to water the garden, and I love how the garden just looks like it grew inches during the night when I do watering in the evening. I come out in the morning and it's just like everything's exploded. Oh, something to show you down here. I was so excited to see this morning. My calendula or pot marigolds are starting to bloom. Isn't that beautiful? We're gonna have an orange one here. So this little patch that I grew here is, I'm gonna be using the petals to in my soap. I'm also going to make some cream with them as well. We have our garlic scapes down here that we need to get picked today. You know what? I think I might steam some beet tops. I love steamed beet tops just with butter and salt and pepper. But we have lots here we can pick. I'm trying to make my way to the high tunnel right now, but I just have to keep stopping and showing you all these beautiful things. Look at the beautiful cosmos. This is that Salanova lettuce from Johnny's that I was talking about the other day. And the thing that I love about this is that it just doesn't seem to bolt in the heat nearly as badly as some other varieties do. And it's held up to that blazing hot day that we had. I think it was almost 40 degrees in the full sun, and it's held up great. Okay, one more stop before we get to the high tunnel. Look at how beautiful the green stalk's looking. I just love these little petunias, so cute. While it's not blazing hot out today, it's certainly too warm to be outside working for too long. So I really need to get this job that I need to do in the high tunnel done. So let me show you what I got up to yesterday. These are my indeterminate tomatoes. So most of these on this row are Amish paste tomatoes. And you can see I did a whole bunch of pruning yesterday. So I wanted to share with you my pruning methods for indeterminate tomatoes, which are these guys over here, and the determinate or bush style tomatoes that we have over here. So as you can see, very different growing habits. These are the determinate tomatoes on this side and the indeterminate tomatoes over here. So quite a big difference, isn't there? And with such different growing habits, there's different ways that these plants need to be maintained. So let me show you here. Like I said, I got this one done last night, but oh dear, I have one that fell over there that I need to tie up. But I have this whole row on this side and this one on this side that I need to get done today. I like to keep my indeterminate tomatoes pruned so that there is not a lot of leaves happening at the bottom of the stem, like so, just so that the leaves aren't touching the ground. I've talked about this lots before, but most tomato diseases come in from the ground. We don't have a lot of tomato diseases in our area, but I also like how neat and tidy it is and how there's a lot of airflow for the plant. So I keep them pruned like this. And as you can see, I don't keep a lot of foliage on. Obviously, we want enough so that the plant can photosynthesize, get enough energy it needs to produce beautiful fruit. But I find that my tomato plants do best and the fruit ripens the fastest if I keep the foliage down to a minimum. And one of the other things that I do is I always pull off the suckers. Let's see, do I have an example of where we have a sucker we can pop off here? Here's a good example over on this side. So this is what we would call a sucker. We want to pull that off. As with anything, you can talk to 10 different gardeners and probably get 10 different pieces of advice on how to actually maintain your tomatoes. I'm just going to share with you mine and what works best for me. So my indeterminate tomatoes, not only do I keep them pruned up on the bottom, keep the foliage fairly thin on the top, pull off all of those suckers because in our short climb or short growing season, those won't be able to produce any fruit anyway. So I'd rather the plant put in the energy into growing the fruit than into growing more branches and leaves. The other thing that I do with my tomatoes is by usually the first week of August, I top them. that means I actually cut the top off of the plant, because at that point, anything that's going to be developing flowers is not going to have enough time to actually produce fruit on the plant in our short growing season. From the point at which a tomato plant produces flowers, like these up here, to the point at which you're actually going to have a full-size fruit is about 15 to 20 days, and then it can take another 10 days or so after that for that fruit to fully ripen. So knowing that our temperatures are going to drop by the end of August, these plants are probably going to stop producing at that point. We could potentially even see cold enough temperatures into the first to second week of September to kill off the tomato vines altogether. There's no point at all in me having those extra flowers, that extra growth and all of that happening on the plant. Again, I would much rather it form or put the energy into forming the fruit, developing the fruit, and ripening that fruit than producing new fruit. So that's how I manage my indeterminate tomatoes. Let's go over to the determinates. Oh my goodness, friends, on the way over, I found a ripe tomato. So these ones are called duckling. This is a dwarf style tomato. So this is another type of tomato, which is a determinate variety of tomato, but also small. So it's even more dwarfed in size than the bush tomatoes down that way are in comparison to the indeterminates on this side. The nice thing about these though, is they ripen fruit early. I'm so excited. First tomato of the year. I could have let it go a little bit longer. It's still a tiny little bit green, but it's so good. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's get into our determinate tomato. So obviously you can tell, completely different type of growing habits this one has. More of a bush rather than a vine. And the determinate tomato plant is going to have a predetermined height, and then it's just going to stop growing, usually around 3 to 4 feet or so. Outside of being bush instead of vine, one of the other things that's different about the growing style of this is it generally sets all of its flowers, or produces all of its flowers and sets all of its fruit approximately around the same time, usually within a week or two. And it's not going to, once all of these flowers have started to produce fruit, it's not going to start producing more flowers. Again, sometimes there'll be 1 or 2 that will form, but in general, that's how these tomatoes grow. When it comes to these plants, I don't actually recommend, and I don't think anybody really recommends, pulling off the suckers as the plant is growing, because all of those suckers are going to produce a branch that isn't going to just keep growing and growing. It's going to grow to the height or size the plant's genetics are predetermined to grow, and then it's going to stop at that point. And each one of those branches will produce flowers and will produce fruit. So you actually greatly limit the amount of fruit, or diminish the amount of fruit that your plant's capable of producing by cutting off the suckers. So don't do that. That being said, you can still do some pruning on them. So instead of pruning off branches, we're going to prune off extra leaves. And the only reason that you would do this is to increase airflow around your plant. Particularly important if you live in a really humid climate, or a climate that is prone to tomato diseases. So like I said, because we don't have tomato diseases here, this isn't as important. We don't even have hornworms, if you can believe it. There are some advantages to growing in the north, but I still think it's a good practice just to keep the plant with good airflow in general. But you can actually prune tomato plants pretty vigorously without causing them much damage. It may slow down their growth for a few days, just if they go into a little bit of shock, but they catch up fine. And I have never noticed it causes any major damage, to be fairly aggressive when I'm pruning. And usually I only come in every week or 2 during this time of the year and do any pruning anyway, so I kind of have to be fairly aggressive because usually there's a lot to do. So there, you can see already we've got a lot more airflow, and also some weeds in here too that need to get pulled out, but we have a lot more airflow in this plant already. So that's what I'm going to be up to today, is just getting this. I think we're going to start on the indeterminate side though, because there are some of those that need to be tied up as well. We'll get that row done, and then we'll head out and get our garlic scapes picked. Look at our melons. They are just looking so great. Getting lots of fruit on these. Probably do some hand pollination in here. And I always pull these off. These are suckers as well. So this is just another tomato plant. You can see all the roots there. If you live in a long enough growing zone, you can plant this and get another tomato plant out of it. So this one here is a kaleidoscope pink. I got this one from Moonglow Farms. We have black crim, also from Moonglow. Always a good idea to have a knife or a pair of scissors or something when you're doing pruning, because for the most part you can just snap the leaves off, but sometimes there'll be a more persistent one that needs scissors or a knife. Sometimes one of the things that I'll do is just have a long line like this and run it in front of a whole bunch of tomato plants at once. Saves me having to tie each individual one up. Well, that side's looking much tidier now. I still have this side to do, but it is getting a little hot in here. So I'm gonna wait and do that this evening, but I wanted to show you something I just found that is also almost as exciting as the tomato. You ready? Look at that. It's a cucumber. That's so awesome. This variety is a slicing cucumber and it's called Socrates. Also a great one for a northern garden. I get almost all my seeds from West Coast Seeds here in BC. They do ship all over Canada, of course, and down into the States, although there are some seeds I've heard that they aren't able to ship across the border, but most they can. Look at this. Peppers. Peppers. That is incredibly exciting. Look at all the flowers. Very, very close second to the tomato. So close, not quite, but so close. Okay, so now we have to pick our garlic scapes. Garlic scapes form on hardneck garlic. That's what this is here. And you want to pull them off because they will form a flower, and then they put all its energy, or the plant puts all its energy into forming the flower and not into producing a nice big garlic bulb. So you do want to pull these off. I honestly waited just a smidge too long because you can see that these are starting to just about get to the point where they're going to flower. Not all of them are like that, but some of them. So all I do with the garlic scapes is freeze dry them and then make garlic powder, garlic scape powder and garlic scape salt with it. And then I just use that the same way I would use garlic powder. We're not big pesto fans here, but garlic scapes also make a really nice pesto. I did grow a couple of varieties of soft neck garlic this year. Just a couple to try. I'd never tried them before. And I have heard that soft neck varieties store better than hard neck varieties do. Although my hard neck garlic has stored really well and right into the spring in my cold room. So I guess we'll see. But they don't form scapes. So this little patch right here doesn't have scapes on it. So the other advantage, I guess, of hardneck varieties is that you do get this kind of first bonus harvest of scapes, if you like scapes. I've also done scapes fermented, and I'm probably going to do a few of those because they're pretty good. But most of these are going to go into powder. Look at how thick that is. Before we go inside, we're just going to pick a couple of peonies here because I had mentioned making peony jelly in a previous video, and whoops, these ones are just about done. And several of you mentioned that you would like to see how I do that. So we'll pick some and then we'll go inside and make some jelly with these beautiful blooms. All right, friends, we're back inside, which I'm very happy to be because it was getting pretty hot out there. I have my food processor ready here and my scapes all washed up over here. And so I'm actually going to just waz them up just a little bit. I don't know why I say waz them up. I think I got that from Jamie Oliver or something like that. Anyway, I am going to waz them up in my food processor and then put them onto the freeze dryer trays. They freeze dry way faster when you do that with a more fibrous type of vegetable like these guys are. And I'm also going to ferment some, so I'll show you that. We also need to strain out our beautiful chive vinegar that I meant to do about a week ago. It's not hurting it to sit in that vinegar, but I'm gonna get that strained so that I can use that for salads, because we're definitely in salad season now. What else we were gonna do? Right, also have all of the peony flowers in the sink here, and they have just been soaking in some water to get the bugs out, because one thing about peony flowers is they do have quite a few bugs in them. Using boiling water to steep them just sort of speeds up the process a little bit. And then we'll make a quick batch of jelly. I'm only going to make a couple of half pints of jelly because these are going to be for Christmas gifts. What have we made so far with flowers this year? We've made rosehip jelly, or not rosehip jelly, we will be making rosehip jelly. I love rosehip jelly and rosehip syrup, but we've made rose petal wild rose jelly. We made some cordial with lilac, and now we're going to be using the peonies to make a jelly as well. You can actually make jelly with lots of different flowers. Let's shove a bunch of these. You know, probably be better to just roughly chop these first. Let's do that, shall we? So when it comes to freeze drying them or dehydrating them and then turning them into powder, you don't have to worry about taking the fibrous bits off. Like the end is usually a little bit tough, but you do want to make sure that you chop that off if you're going to be making any kind of pickles, like we're going to make the fermented garlic scape dill pickles today. So we do want to take those off for that. But for this, we can just chop it all up and put it in. So now we're just gonna put this down on our tray. Wow, that is very aromatic. Oh my goodness. One tray down. So I'm gonna take out kind of some of the smaller, more tender ones, and we'll use those to make our pickles. That's probably good for our pickles. I got some little teeny tiny ones off of those garlic that we transplanted in the spring. I had some garlic that came up from last year, and it was like an entire bulb of garlic. So I pulled them apart and planted them again, and I'm definitely gonna get garlic out of them, just not humongous bulbs. Okay, next tray. I'm excited because in about an hour and a half or so, I get to jump on a call with my membership. We have a call every week on Friday evenings where I do lots of kind of troubleshooting with people if they're having issues in their garden or with their canning or whatever. And sometimes we bring in speakers. So I had a good friend of mine who's an herbalist come in last week, and she taught us all about herbs. This morning I had 2 calls with the membership, because one of the perks of the membership is that you get a 30-minute kind of introductory call, which I really love. So I had 2 of those this morning, and they were so much fun. The doors to the membership aren't open right now, but I'm going to be opening them again. When am I going to open them again? I haven't decided yet. Probably in a couple of weeks. And I do have a wait list over on my website if you want to go get on the wait list, because usually if you're on the wait list, you get a deal. So that's something to consider. But I'll let you guys know when we open the doors up again, because it's really a wonderful community of women. And I feel like the members get a lot from it, from being able to learn from me, but I also get a lot from it just being able to hang out with a lot of women with similar interests. It's really fun. Okay, let's get this last batch in. Just gonna hold off on chopping up the rest of those because I don't want to make my hands smell any more garlicky than they already do. I'll wash them really well. Probably rinse them with a little vinegar too, just to get the garlic smell off them. I should have done this in a different order and done the garlic last and the jelly first. But what's done is done. So we're gonna put our beautiful petals right into the jar here. So you want to make sure that you're only using the petals for this, not any of the green, because the green will give it a more of a kind of a vegetable, well, a green sort of flavor. I don't have any dark pink ones. Dark pink ones are really nice to use because they make your jelly quite pink. And this is going to be quite light. As you can see, there's a lot of light pink in there. So we're just gonna add some lemon juice to this. And this is organic lemon juice that I'm using. Our hot water. So we're just gonna set this aside now and let that steep for a little bit while we get the rest of our stuff done. So I am just gonna quickly run outside and grab some dill. I'll be right back. So we're gonna put this in the jar. We're going to put our scapes in the jar, layer them as tightly as we can, and then we're going to cover them with a brine with 3 tablespoons of salt to 6 tablespoons of boiling water, just so that it can dissolve. If you have chlorinated water, then you want to either buy some distilled water or boil your water. I think it's for almost an hour you need to boil it for, but you'll have to look that up, to boil off the chemicals in your water, because that will impede the fermentation process of your pickles. I'm using quart jar for this because just Dan and I like these, so I don't need to make a whole bunch of them. And I'm just going to top this with the garlic scapes, just cut them so that they're going to fit in the jar and pack as many of them in there as I can. And then I'm going to make a brine. One sec. You can use canning salt or kosher salt. Just make sure that whatever salt you're using is not iodized. So we're just going to mix this in. And any extra brine you have, you can set aside to use for your next batch, or if you're wanting to ferment something else. So there we have that dissolved. So I have seen a lot of people make these, and they put them in so that the scape looks like this. And that's fine to do it. I actually, the first time I ever did it, I did it that way too. But when I eat them, I just want to eat them in small pieces rather than taking out a big piece like this and then having to cut it and eat it, just because it's kind of an awkward shape. So I actually cut mine up into just smaller pieces and do it that way. But you can just do it whatever way you kind of prefer, whatever size you want your pickles to be. If you have not tried fermented food before, so if you've had sauerkraut, then you've eaten fermented food, because sauerkraut is fermented cabbage, or kimchi, also fermented. But if you haven't done it before, you haven't eaten it before, then I would really suggest making a small batch initially, because it is an acquired taste. I find that some people really love it, some people do not. I have a couple of my kids that won't touch it with a 10-foot pole, any kind of fermented food, and others of them that love it. I personally really like it. Had people try my fermented food and not thought it was fantastic. So definitely just try a small jar the first time you do it. So you can do the flower tops, those are fine to ferment as well. So when you're putting things into jars to ferment, you want to make sure you pack it in nice and tight, and you're going to need something to weigh down the top, because you don't want any of your product to be up above the level of the brine, because it will end up molding. So I use mason top pickle pipes and pickle pucks, but you could use a jar filled with water to weigh it down. That works really well. The pickle pipes or the mason top ones anyway, are not very expensive. I personally think they're worth it, because they will last you forever. You'll never have to replace them. At least I've had mine for a long time, and they are as good as they were when I bought them, because they're just glass. The weights are glass and the tops are silicone, so they last good and long. You know what? This jelly is going to be so plain because of the white flowers that I'm using, which of course seems obvious. So I'm actually gonna mash up some blueberries and add those in there too, to add a little bit of color, and the flavor will be just fine in them too, or in it too. Just add a little bit, just enough to give us some color. There. That should help a little bit. So now we're gonna top off our pickles with our brine. And like I said, we want it to make sure it comes all the way up to the top and is going to cover our pickles. So something else that I personally like to do is I use either a cabbage leaf, or if I'm making other kinds of pickles that I don't want a cabbagey kind of flavor, I'll use a horseradish leaf to make kind of a little lid to help hold down all the vegetables with this weight sitting on top of them. I just find that works better than just the weight itself, because the weight will obviously hold down some, but some can float up around the side. And like so. And then I have a little lid for this that'll hold everything down. And the great thing about using a horseradish leaf or a grape leaf is something else you could use, is that it has tannins in it which help to keep things crisp. So you can put it in like that. So you can see it holds everything down. Then we put our weight in on top and weigh down our veggies. And then I'll just pull off. If there's any little kind of floaty bits like this that come up, I'll just pull those off. So this is what a mason top pickle pipe looks like. So it basically just has a little bit of a hole there, and that is for the gas to be able to off gas. If you don't want to buy these, or you don't have them right now and you want to get into fermenting right away, you can just use a piece of cloth over the top of it. So whenever you're fermenting, one thing that I always say to do is to make sure that you have something underneath, so that this isn't just sitting just right on your countertop. This is especially true if you have wooden counters, where I'm going to put this down in my pantry. We have wooden shelves. And the reason for that is because this can seep juice out the side of this. As this starts fermenting and starts bubbling, it can come up over the top, and those juices can ruin your countertop. So definitely make sure that you have it sitting on a plate or something that has edges on it, so any of that extra liquid gets captured by that and not on your countertop. So now what we're going to do is just set this aside for around 7 days or so. When it comes to fermenting, basically the length of time you ferment is based on your taste preferences. So I would say to start with 7 days, taste it. If it doesn't taste quite sour enough or fermented enough for you, then you can ferment it for even longer, even another 7 days. I kind of find 7 days is a sweet spot for what I like, but do whatever works for you. So you do want to put this in a kind of a warmish, it doesn't need to be warm, but not super cool location. If it is a cooler location, then it will just take longer for it to ferment. And in not in direct sunlight, so out of direct sunlight, in a dark, warm place is kind of ideal. I like to put my ferments either down in my pantry. If I'm doing lots of ferments, I like to do them down in the pantry just because I don't have a lot of counter space. But this time of year, when I'm just starting to do small batches at a time, I just put them on my wooden counter back over there, just kind of to the back. And that way I can keep an eye on it and I remember to check on it. So we're starting to get a little bit of color in here. You can see from the blueberries. All right, friends, it is actually the next morning. One of our adult sons came over for dinner last night, so I put a pause on making the video and enjoyed that visit. Now it is bright and early in the morning. Everybody is still asleep, so I'm gonna get this jelly done. So I do have the juice strained over here. I ended up just putting it in the fridge last night, and it's turned into this beautiful purple pink color here. I'll be able to show you better once it's in the jars. And we're going to be using Pomona's pectin, which is the pectin that I use for making all of my jams and my jellies. So first thing we need to do is measure out the amount of juice that we have, so I know how much pectin we need to add. Look at that pretty color. So we have just a tiny bit over 4 cups. Pomona's pectin has 2 ingredients, and one of them is calcium water, which we made up over here, and the directions for doing that are in the box. And then we have our pectin over here. So we're going to add our calcium water right to our juice, and we're going to add half a teaspoon for every cup. So in this case, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of calcium water to our jelly or our juice, and this we're going to put in the fridge because we can use this calcium water again rather than waste it. Our sweetener, we're going to use some of our honey, and our honey last year, this is last year's honey, was very light, and not overpowering in its flavor. And I find sometimes honey can be really overpowering, especially the really dark stuff. The color of the honey is determined by the kind of flowers that the bees are visiting. And I find wildflowers, which is what our bees primarily feed off of, create a nice light honey. Actually, I'm really excited. So if you'll remember back a couple of weeks ago, I was sharing that we had lost our bees last November to wasps. And I was considering taking a year off of beekeeping. I was talking to BC Bee Supply. I know Winston and Nina, and they offered to send me to Nukes. So I'm actually going to be getting bees again, which I'm really excited about. They are going to be coming, I think, on the 25th or so. It's a little bit late in the season. So one of the things that I did do was save some of the frames of honey that I was going to process for ourselves. And I saved those so that I can give some honey to the bees too, so they don't have to work quite so hard to get some stores put up for winter. And then of course I'll be feeding the bees again in the fall so that I can make sure they have enough to make it through the winter. But it's really hard to keep bees alive over the winter here. So I'm going to implement every single thing I can possibly think of to try to get them through, and hopefully I am successful. And then we're going to bring this over to the stove and get it heating up. And one of the things that you do need to do with pomonas is mix your pectin in with a little bit of your sweetener. Otherwise, if you add the pectin straight to your juice, it will clump. So what I'm going to do with that is add an additional, I don't know, quarter cup or so, a little over quarter cup of organic cane sugar. And then we'll mix our pectin into that. For the pectin, it's 3/4 of a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon to every cup of our juice. So we're going to mix our pectin into the sugar really well. And then once our juice comes to a boil, we will add it. While that's coming to a boil over there, I'm going to strain out our chive vinegar. And this will just go into the fridge so that I can make salad dressings out of it. Oh my gosh, it smells really good. Look at how beautiful the color of that is. And that smells really good. So you can see all the colors out of those flowers. Okay, so we're boiling now. So now we're going to add our pectin with our sugar. And then we're going to bring this up to a boil and boil it for 2 minutes. Just skimming off the foam off the top. The old way of doing it, the way I grew up doing it, was adding just a little bit of butter to the jelly, like half a teaspoon or so, which would de-foam it. But the reason that that is no longer recommended is because it is a fat. And in order to can fats, you need to use a pressure canner, as far as from like a food safety perspective. But I find, honestly, it's no big deal just to skim it off with the spoon or a ladle like this. So we're gonna wash our rims off, get these jarred up. So we're gonna can these for 15 minutes with our steam canner, and I'll show you when we're all done. So now we'll let this pretty pink jelly cool on the counter for around 24 hours, and then we'll put it down in the pantry, and then we'll gift it to somebody probably at Christmas time or for housewarming presents or something like that. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.